Okay, my brother Zion Lex. I'm doing a series, or I'm doing a documentary on black people in the diaspora, and the differences that we have between black people from different parts of the world. Generally, I know that some of your families from the Caribbean,
right,
but you were born here in the United States of America, so you would be considered a black man,
a Yankee,
right? A Yankee. But we have this dilemma. I was born in Central America, in Panama, right? And sometimes I get into these discussions with blacks from these Spanish-speaking countries,
yes,
quote unquote Latin countries,
yes,
what they call Latin countries, and they look at me and they tell me, like, black people that look like me tell me I'm not black, right, from these countries. But when I came to this country, I was readily accepted. I mean, I had an accent, but after I lost the accent and I was able to communicate with people and so forth and so on, what we call quote unquote black Americans, they never made any difference with me. I was always someone that was part. Now, what do you say to people that feel like they're not black because they were born in a Spanish-speaking country, or maybe because you were born in the Caribbean, you are maybe better than a black that was born here? But mainly first addressing the people in the Spanish-speaking countries and the Latin countries that feel like, well, you're not black because you weren't born in America. How do you feel about that?
Well, first thing I want to say is this. The only thing that differentiates Africans of the diaspora from other Africans of other diasporas is a boat stop. The first thing that we have to realize is that we were taken from West Africa, forcefully taken, kidnapped from West Africa, and forcefully placed in America, the Caribbeans, and the UK, right? The only thing that separates us is land, who the slave master was.
The colonizer.
The colonizer. Because, for instance, if you were on the island of Santo Domingo, you have on one side French colonizers, and they decided that this is Haiti. And then you have the Spaniards on one side, and this is Santo Domingo. But in the midst of them is this one same people, who now, fast forward in 2018, some of them actually think they're different people. And some of them have actually made a science about it too. Because, when the mind is diseased, we become brilliant scholars to justify our disease. So some of us even go as far as to say, well, I'm not African, I'm Dominican. And the reason why I'm Dominican is because the Spaniards that colonized Santo Domingo, they mixed with the indigenous population, and there wasn't that much slaves there. Most of the slaves were on that side. That's a crock of BS. Because the records show that most of the island of Santo Domingo, most of the people on the island of Santo Domingo that were brought as slaves were on the Dominican side. The side that is now called Haiti was later inhabited and later gradually became filled with more slaves. But from the onset, most of them were on the Santo Domingo side. The Spaniards got there first.
Right.
And the French came there second. But today, Dominicans think they're different than Haitians. Haitians correctly know and understand that you're my brother. But because of the extreme racism that they face from their Dominican brothers, they even now say, well, forget it. I guess we're not. And that's out of frustration. And to me, it's crazy when I see a person as dark as the first Sammy Sosa.
You got it.
I had to say that. No shout to you. But when I see a person as dark as the first Sammy Sosa, that's speaking fluent Spanish, in my mind, I know I'm looking at an African, regardless of his dialect. regardless of his native tongue. Because I understand that even the language I'm speaking right now is the language of my colonizer. Because I know my history. And I know my ancestral lineage. And I know that in West Africa, we were not speaking English. So I know that every time I speak this language I'm speaking now, I'm speaking the language of my oppressor. Why would I glory in that? What glory is there in that? So when I see people who tell me, I'm Dominican, I'm not African, you African. Wow. And they say it just like that. And they got all kind of textbooks that nobody heard before, that nobody rates, that is not referenced in any journal. Where they getting this from? Oh, I'm from the island of Puerto Rico.
Right.
And you see my complexion? It's because the Spaniards that were in control of Puerto Rico mixed with the indigenous Taino people, and that's me. And the dark ones that look like the first Sammy Sosa, I'm picking on him right now. I'm not laying off for him.
Right.
Right? Those are the Africans. Well, here's a wake-up call to you. Do you know that if you go to the continent of Africa right now and you visit indigenous tribes that have never been colonized, you know you'll find a range of hues and colors? Some of us really, really think that being light-skinned is a gene that came from European raping of African people. A lot of us are not aware of the fact that black African people have always come in several shades. Right. Let's go into ancient Kemet. Right. Look at their portraits. Right. We went to the museum this summer. Right. We saw a range of complexions, to the deepest blue-black like me.
Ancient Kemet being Egypt.
Ancient Egypt, right?
Ancient Egypt.
To the lightest complexions like the Albie Shore brothers.
Right.
Right? The LL Cool J's. Right? Black people have always come in many shades and colors. So when I see or encounter Africans of the diaspora who are stationed in Puerto Rico and who are stationed in Santo Domingo, and I want us to fixate on my choice of language. You're stationed there. That kind of language is usually used militarily or is used for a forced migration. Your family didn't choose to go there. This is where you were stationed. This is where you were placed. You got to remember that. You talking all the Spanish, the Romance language, they tell me, and you allow it to divorce you from your native heritage and people, because slavery became such a horrendous atrocity that being black or being labeled black became a badge of shame. And that is why, even to this day, when you ask the average black person, I don't care if they black from the South or they black from the Caribbean, ask them about their grandmother. Oh, if you go in the Caribbean, here's what you're going to hear. You even hear it in my family. Oh, grandmother? Oh, she was Indian. She was pure Indian. Yeah? So how you get so pure black?
That's the one right there.
I don't know. Yeah. And you go in the South? Oh, Nana? Oh, I heard my Nana's Nana she was Indian.
Cherokee.
And I want us to just revisit in your mind the moment when you hear or heard these people talk about the Indian in your family. I want you to go back in that moment. I want you to remember that you noticed that when they spoke about their African lineage, it was just, so-and-so. But when they spoke about those in their family that was Indian, you could see the excitement and the joy in their face.
I'm not black.
I'm not black. I'm not all the way black. I got some of this in me. You meet black people today that you ask them their nationality, and they be blacker than me. Blue, deep sea blue black, deep sea purple.
Deep sea purple.
You know what they say? I'm half Irish. You half what? Whenever I have to do this, it usually brings me great sorrow. to have to make this correlation and comparison. But sadly enough, do you know wherever a British Bulldog is born, that's a damn British Bulldog?
That's a British Bulldog.
So what you telling me because so-and-so went to UK from the Caribbean and had descendants or a lineage now that's now in the UK, or so now you British?
Right.
Wherever a British Bulldog is born, he's a British Bulldog. Wherever a Chinese Shar-Pei is born, it's a Chinese Shar-Pei.
What do we say of... We call anybody that's Asian Chinese because we don't know how to differentiate.
Don't even know, right?
That's the ignorance. So now
that's our ignorance. Right.
The one drop. The one drop rule. So a lot of us have to have, we had to manage.
That's right.
A lot of the ancestors, right? Because people hearing this video are going to be like, what are you talking about us? Because you weren't even born in the U.S. But my thing is, my ancestors went through it in the Caribbean and in Panama. Mm-hmm. So... it made you black.
That's right.
So a lot of the mulattoes that were born, right? A lot of the mulattoes that were born, they were considered black.
That's right.
Right?
That's right.
So that's where that one drop rule came from. So if they were considered black and they had a black experience, right? And they had to live through a black experience, then automatically you picked up on a black culture.
That's a fact.
Right? Because your father or your natural father didn't accept you. He kept you as a slave. He might have left some inheritance for you or whatever, but your experience was that of a black person. Right? So what do you say for people? Because a lot of the people from those Spanish speaking islands, they will say, well, I'm mulatto.
Right.
You know what I mean? So, but our experience in the diaspora is, if you're mulatto, you're black.
You're still black.
You're black.
You're still black. To prove your point, let's be controversial for a moment. Abraham Lincoln.
Right.
Abraham Lincoln was a mulatto. A lot of people aren't aware of that. In fact, when we come back to this video, we'll more than likely edit it where we can have the terminology, the correct word that they use during his time for mulattoes, because names change every 20-30 years. We was niggers yesterday and today we niggas, as if there's a difference, right? We still niggers in their eyes, right? But
yeah, I think the word mulatto, the root of it is Arabic,
right?
That means mixed race,
right?
Mawala, something like that,
right? In an Arabic tongue,
right?
But there's a word that was used in English, a word with English origin, that was used to describe Abraham and his line and many others like him, because the term mulatto is a newer term, right? So when we edit it, we're going to put it in there for the people to see. But a lot of people are aware of the saying, the urban legend that Abraham Lincoln was hated by the other presidents because he freed the slaves, and that's the reason why the penny is bronze, the color of a black man. It's also the reason why he's the only president not facing the same direction. And in fact, I just visited DC last month.
Right.
And when you go to the Lincoln Memorial and you look at the statue where Lincoln is sitting down, huge statue, is surrounded in darkness. It's black. And ain't no lights up there. Wow. And the columns that is before him is like a jail. Literally. In other words, when you see a column facade on a building, there's always a portion in the middle that you can just walk through.
Right.
It's the entrance. This was built like the columns in the Lincoln Memorial was built like a jail. Bars. No way out. No way in. Unless you got the key. And he's dark. But what they did do is they made his statue of ivory. White. So when you get real close, the color of his statue, the whiteness, is what gives that entire room light. But from afar, even the bottom of the step, you damn near can't even see the statue of Lincoln. And mind you, this is a huge statue. Right. But when you at the bottom step, you could barely see him because it's so dark.
So dark.
Why are they blacking out his history? Lincoln was a mulatto. A lot of people aren't aware of that. And the way that he rose to presidency was very controversial. A lot of people didn't want him to become a president because of the fact that he had indigenous black blood in him. And by indigenous, I mean he had black blood from families that were here pre-transatlantic slave trade. This is a topic that is significant in the conscious community right now. So what we have to realize is that in the eyes of the founding fathers of this country, those who penned the Constitution, those who drew up legislation, those who continue to draw up legislation, if you have a drop of black blood, you are black. Period. We don't care if you look really Snow White. You're still black. In fact, let's take a train ride over to the UK. Isn't the newly married princess supposed to be a black woman? Look at her.
That's right. That's right.
I don't know her name.
Yeah,
her name doesn't ring a bell.
Right now.
But
I know her name. But
I forgot her name because I don't follow what they're calling royalty. I don't follow that. And I don't think any African person should be following that. Because there are several tribes of African people with royalty to this day that is not recognized in the American media. So if they don't recognize
Meghan Markle.
What's her name?
Meghan Markle.
Right, and they just call her Meghan in the public eye.
Right.
So I almost want to apologize for not knowing her name, but I'm being serious. I don't follow what they call, royalty, because again, there are actually more African tribes with kings and queens than anywhere in the world right now, and they don't recognize a single one of them as being such. So how dare I recognize them? But what I'm pointing out is the fact that if you look at Meghan in the pictures that they show, unless somebody told you, you wouldn't even know she's black. She looks white or mixed at the least bit. So here's the thing. Her husband, and I don't even know his name, and I don't apologize for that either.
Prince Harry.
Harry, right? He came under a lot of fire in the British media and even the American media initially because of her having black blood. Her believing to be a black woman. Right. Her being a black woman came under fire. Right. So again, in the eyes of these people, you could be so, in the eyes of these people again, you could look white all you want. But if they can look and find black in your gene pool, you black. Period. And she's the type of woman, Meghan, that she could pass for anybody. If there was a race war that was to break out, she literally could pick what side she want to be on.
Right.
Because that's the kind of complexion she got going on. That's the kind of look she got going on. She could choose what side she want to be on. Right. Some of our brothers and sisters of the African diaspora who live in places like Dominican Republic, places like Puerto Rico, and many other places, even Dominica, some of them can also pass for even white or mixed. And here's the reality. You are black. Period. And the thing that makes you black is your lineage. First, you are of African descent. I don't care how snow white your complexion is. You come from a people that were kidnapped, stolen, raped, and forcefully positioned in America, the Caribbean, and the UK. That is who you are. Your complexion doesn't matter. What language you now speak doesn't matter. What matters is your history and your DNA. Your DNA says you're black, you're African, period. No way to get around it. So I don't even use the term mulatto when I'm speaking to people, because even on a biblical level, the Bible doesn't recognize that. What's a mulatto? We don't encounter them kind of terms in the Bible. You're either this or you're that. We never refer to somebody as being of mixed seed in the Bible per se. Right. We understood that use a Persian or use a Greek. Period. You ain't a Greco-Persian or a Persian Greek because my mother's this and my father's that. The Bible has always said you are what your father is.
Right.
Period.
Right.
And that's what we go by. So, what I would want to say to our brothers and sisters of the African diaspora who live in places like Puerto Rico and Dominican Republic where complexions vary highly, I would adjure you to go back and trace your roots. Ask your mother to jog her memory and your father to jog his memory about their mothers, their fathers, and their grandparents. And ask them to tell you, to describe the people on those islands and how they look. And how, more importantly, those people identify themselves. That's the point that we're missing. Many of us today are afraid to wear the label black because it has become a badge of shame in the media. Everything black is wrong. There's a comedian the other day that went on Def Comedy Jam that was like, you ever notice that everything white is right? Like, if you eating Frosted Flakes, they tell you it's what? Great! But you gotta be cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
You gotta be cuckoo for Cocoa Puffs.
White rice looks beautiful. If you see a speck of brown in it, you're ready to throw away the whole thing. Or, if it's all brown, they call it wild rice. Why? It's gonna jump out and rob you? There's a stigma on our very color that is attached to our nationality. And those who can pass for other colors and possibly other nationalities will do so when they believe it benefits them. But I want those people who do that to realize this. In the eyes of those who you are trying to be, you are not them. Period.
Thank you, my brother.
Peace.